Hello and welcome to Your Scraps, My Treasure, a part of DMV Food Recovery Week, which we are thrilled this year is brought to you by the DC Food Recovery Working Group, a network of nonprofits, local businesses, and district government agencies, and individuals passionate about food recovery, all working in the district, and our incredible partners across the border in Maryland, the Manna Food Center's Community Food Rescue. Very excited to have Cheryl Collin with us today, who has done so much to turn Food Recovery Week into a throughout the DMV occurrence. Tonight's event is presented by the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development, where I work in our Innovation and Equitable Development team. So before I go on, I want to share a few other things about Food Recovery Week as a whole. You can see the other events. There still are 6 events throughout the rest of the week happening tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, and even on Sunday. In addition to DMV Food Recovery Week happening, it is Imperfect Foods Food Waste Week in the district, where they are working with 6 local restaurants, again, having events and opportunity for you to taste some food made with otherwise what might be ugly or imperfect produce, but that is also beautiful. We'd like to thank our media partner, the I Hate Politics podcast, and again, all of the partners who made Food Recovery Week happen. Tonight's event is being recorded, so it will be recording the speaker at any point in time. When we have our breakout rooms, those will not be recorded. That said, I will send out the recording to all those who registered, and we'll also be sending out a survey about Food Recovery Week in the weeks that follow. It will come from Eventbrite, and we'd love you to fill it out. I'll remind you about it at the end, but just so we can get more feedback to inform both the events over the coming year and, of course, next year's Food Recovery Week. We encourage you to post on social media about the event with the hashtag DMV Food Recovery Week. And again, you can check us out online at dmvfoodrecoveryweek.org. And without further ado, we are going to get started with the rest of the presentation. So, I thank you for dropping that into the chat, Cheryl. So it is so exciting to have so many folks with us today, and I would love to get the sense. We've had some folks drop into the chat, but I'd love for people in the chat to introduce yourselves and what brings you here today. And then we will head over to our collaborative software of Mural in a moment. Wonderful. We'll let a few more things come in through the chat. And love the icebreaker question of what you're having for dinner. Again, strongly encourage you. We are thrilled to have this at a time in the evening. Again, lots of events happening throughout the day as Food Recovery Week, but definitely know that it is peak dinner time. So what we are going to do. Oh, wonderful, Karina. Thanks for letting us know. Very excited to have you with us today. We are going to very shortly head over to the mural, where we are going to be talking through what it really looks like for your scraps to become someone else's input. And I want to start by seeing if there's anyone on the call who has any examples they would like to share before I share some examples that we're very proud of from within the city. So again, that question is if you or any other partners that you work with have examples of how you are using an output from another business as an input to your business. Carrot greens turned into carrot top pesto. Fabulous, Karina. Yeah, so the idea of cross-utilization in a kitchen is absolutely the output from one process, whether you're making carrot soup or you're serving carrot sticks to the kids in school for lunch. the carrot top greens are an incredible way to then turn those into pesto. So at the larger scale for a food business, businesses that do focus more on things like soup might be making large volumes of carrot soup and then have very large volumes of carrot greens. And so the idea of those then going into a larger scale process for carrot green pesto is exactly what we're looking into this evening. And throughout other work in building a more circular food economy in the district. So again, that's a beautiful example. Absolutely. Oh, Celeste, fabulous. I would love, if you feel open to it, for you to unmute yourself and share a little bit more about how you use coffee grounds to make paper and where you're sourcing your coffee grounds from.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Celeste, and I'm a paper maker with 25 years experience. So I make handmade paper. I use coffee grounds, and I get them from when I go to like the farmer's market, or sometimes I used to have a friend at Starbucks that would give me used grounds. I also get vegetable waste from the farmer's market, and I make cotton, paper, abaca. I get used jeans from like the thrift store. So I try to reuse as much as possible. I have a thing at home where I save all my onion skins, broccoli tops, everything, and eventually goes into handmade paper, and I make books and cards and paper for other artists.
That is so cool. Thank you, Celeste. I also love that. Anybody else? Have any other examples? That's a really incredible one. What kind of food scraps do you work with, Celeste, when you say you're taking, do you use those for the dyes or also as the input for the paper?
Both. I actually use like celery and walnut, if I get walnuts for the dyes. Tomato tops, carrots. I mean, so and beets, they impart some color, but mostly I take them and I use the strands, and they actually goes into the body of the paper. So any vegetable product that I can get and, make into a pulp, I can add to, my other fibers.
That is absolutely incredible. So cool. Celeste agreed with the other folks who were asking. We would love your website to learn more and follow up. And so, yeah, that is super. That's a really exciting example. So since Celeste brought up coffee grounds first, coffee grounds are a perfect example of a way to really engage this in the circular economy. Does anyone else have anything else that they use coffee grounds for? Whether that's at a small scale, it does not necessarily have to be within your business. As I know that some folks like Claire are constant crafters at home. Yes, exactly, a body scrub. Coffee grounds make a great body scrub. And so whether or not that is your business or whether it is just a home scrub, coffee grounds are fabulous for your skin, in addition to as an exfoliant, also as some say that coffee grounds and the residual caffeine in them is actually fabulous for your cells. And so, Inez, is there anything else that you have to say about the coffee as body scrub? It's great for ingrown hairs. Fabulous. Yes. So one of the other things that many businesses use coffee grounds for is that it is actually an excellent input into mushroom cultivation. So coffee grounds are often used specifically for mushroom cultivation, but relatedly, they are also a really fantastic part of compost writ large. Microbes love them, worms love it. And so whether you're doing vermicomposting or home composting, coffee grounds can be a really nice addition to a compost, especially since they're already ground and soil. Like as they decompose, they really add a lot to soil. But again, mushroom farmers, many use coffee grounds as a core part of that because of the possibilities to be that again, fungus really thrive on some residual caffeine there. Houseplant fertilizer, absolutely. Many folks add it directly to houseplant fertilizer. Beautiful. Any other examples of what folks are doing with coffee grounds? Before we move on, to scour the oven, absolutely. As a great, so not just for scrubbing your body, but also scrubbing your surfaces in your house. Love that. And I want to remind folks, and I am going to show you what is happening in the mural as we transition here. So if you all click on the link that has come through in the chat, you will see something that looks a little bit like this. There's quite a number of us. There's 5 of us, 6 of us here. And so in Mural, it is a collaborative software you can zoom in and out of. So sorry if this is making you nauseous for a moment, but I want to, we're gonna start with just taking a step back to hear where you are in the food system. Again, I know that we have lots of folks who are just general residents, very enthusiastic to hear more, but feel free to grab one of these name and organizations and place yourself with where you are in this system. Again, if you are a resident, you're welcome to drop yourself anywhere that feels most relevant to you, whether you are in, and again, no need to put an organization there. Now, Mural, there are some challenges with navigating in Mural. You can grab and move things, as you may see with this orange Post-it. It is also double clicking will drop a Post-it note wherever you double click. So as a heads up, this is just an opportunity to get you playing around in Mural before we move on to the rest. So you should be able to click on beautiful. I see things happening. And then feel free to double click on the on what you have grabbed. I promise it gets easier. You're also welcome to leave the existing name and org spots, and feel free to double click and add yourself a Post-it where you can put your name of where you are in the food service landscape. There we go. The Post-its are working a little bit more easily, so feel free to just ignore the other colored dots. Beautiful. This is just to get a sense of where we are covered in the food system. Wonderful. Love seeing what's coming in here. And again, invite you to add your name in there. Beautiful. Okay, so we've got some great, a lot of folks in food production coming through, many folks in food processing. Wonderful. Will from Chase the Light, thanks for being with us today. And if you are having trouble accessing the mural, feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself now. I know there are more participants than I am seeing in the mural, so feel free to just say hello. And we will put you on the screen. Let me zoom in a little bit so we can see what's coming in here. Karina, as she mentioned, growing produce in the J.O. Wilson School Garden, mostly for educational purposes. Maya, not affiliated with an organization, but like to grow my own veggies. Wonderful. Vegetable and butcher in the retailer restaurant space. Absolutely. Food recovery. Oh, that's me. Will, in that food adjacent space. I happen to know working in beauty. Again, the Department of Small and Local Business Development does a lot of support for small businesses, community services. All right. Well, feel free to, as you make your way in to the mural, to drop that in as well. We are going to continue onward. Now, I know that we have many residents in addition to businesses, but I'd invite you to think about some, whether it is residential or whether it is from your business. What are some of the underutilized outputs from your business, or in the case of a residential, in your even in your life, in your day-to-day life? What are the underutilized outputs? So for example, I ran a popsicle business for many years, working with farmers at farmers markets to take their ugly produce, what was left at the end of the market, to process it into pretty ugly pops. And we had, at the end of our process, a lot of peels, and we had a lot of greens. Again, we were making popsicles with carrots, with butternut squash, with things like that. And so, as we mentioned, as some folks mentioned earlier, things like greens were often what was left behind from our process. I love this. Coffee grounds, onion peels, animal bones, tree trimmings. Yep. Food waste from the school cafeteria. Yeah. And interesting. Karina, do you have any more details about sort of what's in that? I know that one thing that we've heard from lots of school settings where kids are getting things like bananas and apples, there's always that fruit left, right? The bruised banana, the apple that fell on the floor that is still edible once being washed or perhaps cooked, but no one is going to eat it. So the more detail we can get in this section, the better. Yeah, fruit leftover. A lot, and food that kids don't eat goes to the landfill with a lot of other trash. Yeah. So what we in the food recovery space split that into is a sort of non-edible food, and then edible food. So that fruit that still could be eaten, even if kids are not enthusiastic about it, would be edible food. And then the non-edible foods, which again, may not be fit for another process, but thinking about one of the examples that we're very excited to have in the district is a lot of spent grain from our breweries. District brewery culture is exploding. And so we have lots of breweries in the district. And those are both incredible places to use fruit and also produce a lot of spent grain. And so we've seen breweries in the district source ugly produce. Ancho, which is not a brewery, but a cidery, sources street apples that may not be as aesthetically pleasing, but that are certainly edible, as well as sourcing from other farms, orchards, the fruit that isn't first quality, those seconds of apples, of peaches, of nectarines that are going into these fruity beers that we're seeing coming up. So that's really exciting to see. But coming back to the output from their process, spent grain can actually be used in many processes. So again, a lot of spent grain in the city is currently going to animal feed. So most brewers in the district have partnerships with local farms to be sending that spent grain to farms where it is processed a little bit more and fed to cattle or to pigs. In both cases, grain is, again, in the sustainable ag space, may be debatable, but is currently a large part of the feedstock for both pigs and beef, and cattle. And so a lot of that spent grain is going to feed those animals. So in, again, the food recovery hierarchy, we put edible food. If there is edible food, we want it to go to humans, to feed people, particularly hungry people. That's why so much of Food Recovery Week focuses on that food rescue, that food donation. The next step is to be processed into more edible food for humans. And then last, to be processed to food for animals, and then to composting, or at the very last, what we are trying to avoid as much food waste as possible going to any landfill or incineration. So while spent grain can go to animal feed, it's even better for it to go into other human feeding processes. So there are every year collaborations between our local brewers and bakers to make pizza with spent grain crust, to make loaves of bread with spent grain. And so DC Brow partners with Pizzeria Paradiso to run a fundraiser taking spent grain from DC Brow into the pizza at Pizza Paradiso. So that's always exciting to keep your eyes out for. It's often a different time of year every year, but that's been a long-term collaboration. And then when it's not going to bakers, again, to animals. Anything else that people have heard of happening with spent grain? In some cities, breweries send their spent grain to be turned into granola. It's semi-fermented, has probiotics in it, tastes great, especially if you're mixing with fruits or chocolate. So some really incredible spent grain granolas as well. So dog biscuits, yes, I've seen spent grain go into dog biscuits, and yes, Andrea, absolutely. Great example that compost is a possibility for most of these food outputs that we're talking about. And DSLBD will be launching in this this year, or early in 2022, which is to say the district's fiscal year. We will be launching food waste innovation grants that are going to help food businesses compost what they cannot, but also to really be thinking about how they can reduce food waste before it is actually going to compost. Are spent grain sold or given to new product makers? That's a really exciting part of this space, and why we're so passionate about it is because in many cases, businesses are paying large sums of money to get rid of the waste that they're generating. So thinking about your cafeterias, Karina, the district spends very large sums of money to get rid of waste generated by schools. Again, one of our partners in this week, Imperfect Foods and Hungry Harvest, which operates a very similar model. Hungry Harvest started by sourcing from a food distributor who paid $1,000 per pallet of food that they had to throw away. So that was food that just couldn't get sold in the time that it was good, or they had estimated demand for a given type of product. So much of it was incredibly edible, but they were paying $1,000 per pallet of food that had to be thrown away. So they essentially had $1,000 to invest in anything that could get that food waste, or they had, $950 to be able to still make a profit from, if they could get it to anyone else who could use it in a different way. So that's how these models came about, because actually it is quite expensive for these businesses to get rid of it. So things like coffee grounds, like spent grain, are usually given free to new product makers. The space where there is more of a challenge is around transportation, especially in a place like the DMV, where we do have some long distances and where transportation can be quite expensive. So that is one of the things that projects like this, we're really trying to create more of a symbiotic ecosystem within our food system right here in the DMV, in the close-in DMV, where food from one business can be going in close proximity to another business. And so that's why currently the spent grain is still going to a nearby farmer, still within our watershed, but it is fairly far away. And there's, of course, only so much spent grain that one farmer can take. And as the number of breweries increase, we are interested in how do we support more of those food businesses in this space. So again, for those of you who may currently be just interested public members, hope you'll consider starting a business in any one of these spaces that we talked through today. Onion peels and animal bones is a great other example. Waste product from many restaurants. Anyone who's cooking with onions comes up with onion peels. And I know that someone said in the chat earlier, even at home, about making stock with any of those vegetables, the vegetable peels, vegetable rinds, the middle part of a pepper, the onion peel can actually be fabulous in stock to make your own healthier, lower sodium, much more delicious stock. I put my ginger peels are the secret ingredient in my stock. I've now shared it with you, so less of a secret, but it is incredible. And otherwise ginger peels often don't go into a recipe, but it makes it game changing for your soups, coming back to those delicious carrot soups that you may be making. A good stock from your vegetable scraps can be transformative. So when you think about a business in the district that might be making sandwiches or salads, still producing some of these food scraps like onion peels, like animal bones, but they are not making soups. If you are running a food truck that just does sandwiches and salads, you might not need the quantity of peels for stock. And again, vegetable peels are a pretty low value commodity, but if that can make stock for another business, what do those collaborations look like? Onion peels also, as we heard from Celeste, can be used as an incredible dye. And I'm learning more about the paper industry. Animal bones often are a particular challenge because they cannot often be used in compost. Depending on the type of composting that's happening. Industrial compost can process animal bones, but smaller community composting often avoids animal bones. So that's something, again, really looking for some creative solutions for. I love this, JD. We don't make soup for our customers because it's not easy to deliver without spillage. That's super true. But it's an idea to make soup for our team to eat while working. Absolutely. Heading into winter, soup I love that idea of thinking how even something you might not be able to get to your customers is something that your team drivers could be eating. I do not know if local soup makers like Supergirl use veggie scraps for stock, but I've got to imagine they do. One thing that we heard in today's restaurant rescue panel was that for most restaurants, you really, especially in this economy for restaurants, cannot be throwing anything away. So there's really a huge appeal of using that for stock. But one thing that I will say, less so for things like vegetable peels, but one challenge for a lot of food businesses, and again, curious for those that are on the line, but we have in conversations of trying to connect farmers and their seconds, their perhaps huge butternut squash, or their potatoes that look a little curly, or carrots that are wound together. One challenge that we've heard from some food businesses is that when you're operating at a large enough scale, you really need things to be as easy and fast as possible. And it is more challenging to peel a carrot that twists. It is more challenging to peel or cook a butternut squash that is a gooseneck. And so one thing that has come up in some of those conversations is a real need for some of that intermediate processing. In the same way, if I can't use your carrot tops for pesto immediately in my meals, those are things that do go bad more quickly. So that idea of that intermediate processing is something that's emerging here. JD, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about other particular types of food scraps that you see a lot of. Or the food types you find most challenging to work with. Mostly vegetable scraps, yeah. Peels. One thing that, also is relevant for many types of vegetable scraps, but not all, are really thinking about what are the other types of animal feed that this can go into. So again, I am a micro example and not a business, but the idea that I both have 2 pet rabbits and volunteer with a rabbit rescue in the district. And so the rabbit rescue relies on large volumes of produce that is donated from grocery stores. Again, you can't feed a rabbit things that have gone bad, but you can certainly feed a rabbit lots of carrot tops. So my rabbits and I fight about who's going to get the carrot tops, whether I'll have them for pesto or they will have them for dinner. But it is interesting to think about what those possibilities are. And again, at a farmer's market, I'm able to get all the carrot tops I could want from a farmer selling carrots, but food businesses, again, are at an interesting scale because it can be a challenge to have enough volume to have someone want to come and transport those food scraps out for you. But it also can create really interesting partnerships. And that's the other thing I really wanted to highlight in today's session is the idea that some of these can actually create more productive partnerships that are higher than the value of just the tons of waste that can be diverted or the cost value of a replaced input with an output from another process. And that's, again, something that with the DC Brau Pizzeria Paradiso collaboration, we've seen such delicious fruit from, is that it is a promotion for both businesses. And both Pizzeria Paradiso and DC Brau are able to attract new audiences, are able to attract media attention that they would not otherwise. So even though for your business or organization, a partnership to be donating, for example, those bananas from your school cafeteria to a local baker who makes banana bread and then donates a percentage of proceeds to some at-school program, the percentage of proceeds may end up being quite small. The total benefit to the business may be small-ish, but in total, there's actually this next added value of the communications element of this, where there is a story to be told. So how do they cross promote and explain the scraps into new product? Great question, Cheryl. And I think that it is sometimes in the case of something like spent grain into pizza dough, needs a little bit more information of, well, am I eating beer while I'm making pizza? And so that is one that does require a little bit more information, as opposed to something, and I've seen this in other cities, if not here in DC, where the case of the bananas, again, I don't know anyone who sells bananas who doesn't have large of banana waste, where you can actually see some real beyond, like, additional added benefits of those bananas going into banana bread. And it's very easy, you know, everybody knows that ripe bananas in banana bread is already what you're making the product out of, as opposed to using new wheat, new flour in your pizza crust. Is it an ongoing collaboration or is it on particular days? It is annual, the DC Brau Pizzeria Paradiso collaboration. From conversations with DC Brau, with Blue Jacket, with other breweries in town, there is interest in still looking at what else can happen with those spent grains. Again, the farms are sort of take this large bulk, but that there is interest and possibility for more of that, yes. And I will drop into the chat as well as in our follow-up some of those links so that you can check them out. Blue Jacket, which is a brewery at the Wharf, often periodically uses their spent grain in recipes at their location. So where they might be making pasta from their spent grain and really using it in a dish, again, with that cross utilization. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, JD. The Navy Yard, not the Wharf. Blue Jacket is at the Navy Yard. You'll see the same thing in other Navy Yard businesses. Ice Cream Jubilee makes incredible ice cream. And again, often you'll see those, perhaps again, not an output from another neighboring business yet, but the using really fresh produce. Almost any restaurant that is sourcing fresh produce that they are manufacturing into something like ice cream, like beer, there's the possibility to be using seconds in a way that if you are a restaurant that is serving heirloom tomatoes on a plate and it is just a slice of tomato, you can't afford for it to be anything but beautiful. So let's see, we've talked through a lot of what outputs from businesses are and what inputs they can use. But let's move down to thinking through, for, again, the businesses on the line, what are the most expensive or important inputs into your business? We shared from Celeste, coffee grounds, beets, carrots, celery, other leafy greens, and other things that you can do with coffee grounds. And again, coffee is really expensive, rightfully so, because it's an incredible process to grow and roast and process. But it is something that certainly is an expensive input if purchased on its own, instead of gotten free from a coffee shop post grinding, post brewing. So are there other expensive or important inputs into your business or your organization that currently you're buying first quality? And we'll just brainstorm here. It doesn't have to be something that is a waste product from anyone. But I'm going to give you a minute here just to think through that. Oh, thank you. Mural difficulties are real. Salmon, halibut, local meat, absolutely. That is certainly an expensive. Meats. Well, and we did hear a fantastic example earlier today from the chefs at Joselito of the possibility of sourcing, again, they do lots with fish, that many of the fish scraps that are coming from seafood distributors, those fish bones actually have a lot of meat that are still on them and that are a significant and meaningful input for some of their recipes. So that was an exciting example on the meat side of things. Anything else? Let's see, produce for pop-up distributions at schools. Ingredients for cooking demos in lessons. Yes, very expensive for school-based educational programs. I get fish bones from my local fishmonger and I make fish stock. They don't charge me. That's true. Many won't charge you for that. And there's a lot on there. So you can make an incredible fish stock with that. So again, thinking about those inputs for Cheryl, you are really an incredible example of this in your own kitchen. But again, for those of you thinking about entrepreneurship or thinking about business or the business owners on the call, that's really another possibility. Now, what about, I know that there are folks on the call working in the beauty industry. Will, you shared that. Are there any examples of highly expensive inputs for your business that you can share here?
Very expensive ones. No, I mainly use like vegetable, rinds, peels, and things like that.
Oh, well, tell us more about that. What are you using?
I use carrots, carrot grinds, coffee grinds, fresh turmeric, but like it doesn't have to be the actual edible part of the carrot. Even the stems, the end pieces have enough of the carotene in it. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much the only things
that's
I use
amazing.
for my skincare products. Offhand.
Thanks, Will.
You're welcome.
Sorry, you may be seeing cat whiskers on your screen. There is a cat near the camera. Well, that is a fabulous example of how things like that for a chef, a carrot peel or a carrot top might not have the density of flavor or the aesthetics that you're looking for, but really can be a fabulous input into, again, stock or into a skincare product. I love that. Carrot peel, the turmeric peel, I imagine. And in many, this brings me back to fruit peels, which again, we used in the example promoting this event, but lemon peels, grapefruit peels, orange peels are a key part of the beverage cocktail industry. And so where again, if you're making cocktails in-house, you will use the juice for something else. But often if you're a high-end cocktail bar, you are using the rind on display. Each bartender is slicing the rind, and the rest of the oranges are left and are certainly not going to be what's used on display to make juice, because again, people want to see that whole orange go into the juice machine in those on-site juicers. So that's something that I think is a real opportunity to think about for things like, again, going into soaps and skincare. Orange peel can be an incredible exfoliant as well. Lemon rinds, grapefruit rinds, going into bitters, going into limoncello, going into shrubs. So if those are the kind of outputs you're working with, those kinds of fruit rinds, those fruit peels, there's a huge amount of opportunity. And again, I think about whether or not that's giving to another business or that's thinking about a business line. So perhaps not at your schools, Karina, but in other places, if you are making a cocktail bitter or a cocktail shrub, I keep all of my lemon rinds to make shrubs, as well as most mango pits, fruit peels, pineapple cores. I'll go into my freezer, and then periodically when I have enough to make a shrub, if I were running a business that this fruit was coming from, whether that was a juice business, these shrubs might not end up being something that I'm selling as a part of my business, but that I'm giving samples of, that I'm doing those educational demos with, or that I'm giving as gifts to staff, to partners, to say, hey, this is a really special thing we've made. We're not selling it, but here's a sample. Thanks for your support. Or even, again, thinking differently about our economic model, a huge way that I got produce for Pretty Ugly Pops was in bartering with farmers and farmers' children. So I would deliver popsicles to everyone at the farmers market in exchange for whatever produce they had that week. So thinking for your business, what is it that you can be making from the waste or giving to other businesses from your outputs that can actually be feeding into their process? Excuse me. So we are coming to the end of our time, and we are not going to be splitting into breakout rooms to see what matches we can make today. But I hope this has been some really fruitful food for thought. I am very excited from the connections or the ideas that have emerged today. If you have people you would like to connect with or introductions, we can think about what those connections might be. But I do want to take a few minutes to think about what's missing. What are the kinds of businesses that we haven't yet talked about or named, who might not be on the call today, who are producing either the inputs needed or who could be using those outputs we brainstormed in those earlier sections. Feel free to shout them out, unmute yourself, or drop them into the chat or right into the mural. One thing that comes immediately to mind is, of course, cafes. If there's one thing that we have plenty of in the district, though, it is coffee shops making tons of coffee grounds. The quantity of coffee grounds produced in any single coffee shop is truly unfathomable. When you think about all of the potential uses for it, it is still so much more coffee than all of the ideas we've brainstormed today. Local soup makers. Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely going to prompt me to do some follow-up with Supergirl.
Carolyn, when I go to my local farmer's market, I see at least one local soup maker there. And
Great.
So, yes, Supergirl, but I bet there's a lot of other local soup makers. And I'm wondering if they might want some vegetable scraps to make stock with.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe connecting them directly with the farmers, or maybe they're already doing that. I don't know. But I think farmers markets would be a great venue for you to kind of peruse and see what matchmaking you might be able to do.
Yep.
Because a lot of farmers markets have both prepared food and
that's right. Yeah.
stock and body care products too.
Yep. Oh, and Cheryl asked, sorry, I missed that question. Will, what do you do with these items? With you were mentioning the carrot and the turmeric. Do you want to talk a little bit about Chase the Light?
Well, I make vegan skincare using all edible ingredients. And then I also do other food wellness products, try to offer healthier alternatives to some of the things that we typically grew up on eating, or kitchen, essentials, pantry items, seasoning, sauces like hot sauce and things.
Great. Yeah. Did somebody have something they wanted to say?
I do. Hi, Carolyn. Double duty. We're both in DC Food Policy Council.
Yes.
But the question that I had with the alternative proteins, a lot of plant-based, which was really where I was going. You can take a lot of the scraps and things like that to remanufacture and reproduce plant-based alternatives as far as protein alternatives.
Yeah.
So, and then there is wonderful technology that they're using to be able to do this with the inputs from scraps and other things. So is that something that as businesses, the district would actually look to support? Or because right now there is, where we're talking about climate change, and these are our ways to be able to help lessen the footprint And then also health and nutrition.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. One of the things that that has recently passed in terms of recent food policy is a policy that requires the district government to be calculating the carbon footprint of the food of all of our institutional food. So schools, but also correctional facilities, housing facilities. And so, and a huge part of that will of course be meat. And then we are required to document reductions in those carbon emissions in line with DC's ambitious carbon emission reduction goals. So, that is something that we're looking to both in terms of procurement. It's also something that we're looking at in terms of these food waste innovation funds, is we want to be supporting small food businesses that are actively looking at these other waste products. It does remind me again that, as you said, the plant-based proteins can use a lot of those byproducts from juicing or soup, again, a lot of that pulpy material, as can also go into things like chips or crackers that are really rich in nutrient density, especially compared to just something like a potato chip coming from that plant pulp.
I have one last question and then I'm going to mute myself again. Is this something that's going to be mapped out through the Food Council, or is this something that's going to be mapped out when you were talking about the carbon footprint? Is that going to be mapped out through DC government?
Yes, the Department of Energy and Environment has a new team that will be doing a lot of the carbon emission calculations. And also, in terms of someone shared what's missing, what's needed is software to connect the scraps to a new home, to make more DC Brow Pizzeria Paradiso combinations. Absolutely. Obviously, this event is not going to be doing all of that. And we are other cities, namely New York, which leads the way in much in terms of food waste, although DC leads in many others. We're very happy that New York has really been investing in some of that software to really help map out what those outputs and inputs are, not just in terms of food, but also in terms of manufacturing. And so that's something that will be going into that DC reuse network, would be not just food, but also things like leather outputs from, and we already do have industries of businesses like bicycle trash, using bicycle trash from bike shops in the district to make her own jewelry and wallets and ornaments and things like that. So doing the same thing for food is a hopeful direction that the district is taking. So I love these questions, and I'm so glad that they're recorded too. And I do hope in terms of, again, this was really our first pilot in this space. Was this call was to gauge interest and to start to have these conversations. It is something that we're hoping to do more of, and are really excited for the opportunity that Food Recovery Week gave us to start this conversation and to have this with you. That said, we're still continuously learning and seeing how we can better support the food economy, the local businesses like yours, Will, and like yours, Celeste, that are doing really creative things in food adjacent spaces. So I'd love some of your feedback before we go on what would help you better find partners in terms of how we can improve both tools and terms. So someone put in that last section some software that might help make some of these matches. That's a great example. Are there others? Oh yeah, to tap into some of those other the Montgomery County made. I love that. Yes, a mixer similar to the commercial kitchen one. Our team hosted a commercial kitchen mixer 2 weeks ago to bring together kitchen spaces and food businesses looking for kitchen space. So I think in the future, what I hear in that, Will, is potentially having some more focused session. We wanted today to be really broad to celebrate the diversity of Food Recovery Week, but thinking about having one specifically focused on a specific byproduct, I think. Is that what you're thinking, Will?
Oh, yes, that is what I was thinking.
So thinking maybe one, bringing together cafes and people who use coffee, folks more focused on fruit waste, that kind of thing. In a dream world, we would be doing something like that every month. So keep your eyes open, or perhaps quarterly might be more of what I can get folks on board with. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for putting that in the chat, Constance. In healthcare, we have a lot of waste due to regulations on what we can serve, resident choices, and waste. Would love to be able to find organizations needing waste items, such as coffee grounds, fruit peels, etc. So love that idea, thinking about that software, how we could have that network for matching. I will encourage, if you're thinking about anything edible, really encourage you checking out Food Rescue US, where you can upload and share edible food that you have to donate, and where volunteers come pick it up and make sure that it gets to a place where people can consume it. So edible foods, the food recovery landscape is rich in terms of edibles, but I love that you could share those other things, coffee grounds, fruit peels, and again, edible fruit. So I think that that's a really exciting space of the still edible fruit, or things like, again, carrot greens. In our last couple of minutes, what terms would help you think about the kinds of what we've talked about today? In your industry, how would you describe the outputs from your work? Feel free to drop it in the chat. I know mural has been a challenge, but we know that inputs and outputs are pretty industry terms, and we'd love to know what other words could really communicate that other than waste, because we are trying to get away from the idea that these materials are food waste, because they are edible and usable in other processes. Great. I'm glad that upcycle resonated. Oh, ingredients, like that, thank you. Seconds, Great. If you have other thoughts, I hope you will drop them in your survey, which you will get from us via Eventbrite. You can also drop any questions you have to innoed@dc.gov. Again, my job and my team are here to support small businesses in the DMV that are helping to address the challenges in our communities and create business and jobs here as well. So any thoughts you have on today's event or on this type of supporting business, I hope you will be in touch. And again, check out the rest of DMV Food Recovery Week. There's just a few more days, but there is lots to happen. Thank you again for your flexibility in this new session this year for Food Recovery Week, but I hope it will not be the last. And thank you all for your participation, your patience, and your creativity in our conversation today. Have a great rest of the night and a great rest of Food Recovery Week.